Doctor Strange is currently shaking up the entire multiverse, so I thought now would be a great time to look at the most powerful spells he's cast since his MCU introduction and see if he's really worthy of the title of Sorcerer Supreme.
Because I blipped for 5 years.
Oh. And just for fun, I'll also be looking at some of his greatest comic spells and how Doctor Strange can still use them in the MCU. Don't worry, there's no spoilers for Multiverse of Madness here because it just came out. Alright, with that out of the way, let's don our cloaks of levitation and get started right now. Gotta start with the big one. The Runes of Kof-Kol was seen in Spider-Man No Way Home and was Strange's attempt to help Peter Parker out with this secret identity problem. And because this spell has the capability of altering the minds of everyone on Earth, you can expect the consequences are quite dire. Well, because Peter was insistent on having Happy Hogan remember who he was, the spell became unstable and basically fractured the multiverse. Yeah, when a spell is this powerful and can touch all aspects of the multiverse, maybe don't immediately cast it when a teenager says pretty please. Okay, Strange? But in all seriousness, I feel like if Strange does his proper prep time with this spell and knows all the factors, then it's one of the most powerful spells in existence. I mean, he can make us all forget the Morbius movie ever existed. Okay, that was a cheap shot. I won't make more of those. If you're asking someone the greatest moments in the MCU, near the top of the list would be the final battle of Endgame. Cap is there, ready to go down swinging, when all of a sudden all of the heroes return and stand ready for battle. The music swells, the crowd cheers, Cap says his famous line, the crowd cheers louder, it's all good stuff. But let's not forget the real MVP of this moment, Doctor Strange's portal magic. The portals are probably the most beneficial spell on this list on a pure practical standpoint. It can bring anyone from everywhere, even alien planets. So my question is, since Doctor Strange got snapped away, could Wong have used some sort of locating spell on Peter Parker at the beginning of Endgame and Wong just teleports Tony and Nebula home? Seems easier, no? And you don't want to be caught in the middle of one of those portal spells. One of Thanos' minions learned the hard way what happens when your hand is on one side of the portal and the other isn't. The Time Stone allowed Doctor Strange to cast some wonderfully goofy time-related spells while he still had it in the MCU. With it being the stone that powered the Eye of Agamotto, Strange basically had free reign to use it at his own peril. It worked out well the first time. Using time manipulation, Steven was able to create a time loop that trapped Dormammu in an eternity of just obliterating Doctor Strange in different ways. Which, yes, was probably satisfying the first 100 times, but then got old. Strange basically annoyed the all-powerful Dark Dimension ruler with time travel until Dormammu agreed to leave Earth alone. And then in the What If series, we got to see Strange use the Time Stone again as that version lost his Christine in a car crash. Breaking the rules, Strange kept traveling back in time to try to save his true love, but kept failing over and over again. It then introduced us to absolute points in time and sent Steven on a quest to break it with dire consequences. Unfortunately, these were not spells that Strange could do on his own, and since the Time Stone is destroyed, Strange is going to have to visit Ant-Man or Professor Hulk to access the quantum realm if he wants to time travel again. Our best magic fight that we've seen Doctor Strange take part in has to be his epic brawl with Thanos. It showed that even though Thanos had multiple Infinity Stones, a normal Sorcerer Supreme could almost beat him. This fight in particular gave us a bunch of awesome spells that I want to talk about, but I think the real standout is the Images of Ikonn. As Thanos and Strange are blasting each other with magic, there's one point where Strange does his twirly arm thing and then multiplies in a lot of different versions of himself. Now, usually when you have spells like this, all the other ones are fake, and once you find the real one, the rest disappear. But that's not actually the case here. When Strange uses this Images spell and creates dozens of copies of himself, they're all capable of attacking and doing damage, which means you could have 50 Doctor Stranges suddenly appear to kick your butt. I love this spell. I can't make this list without mentioning the Mirror Dimension. Although it's not something of his own creation, Strange is able to cast a spell that allows him to access and send other individuals directly to the Mirror Dimension for a trippy visual experience. The Mirror Dimension is where you go when you want to have a big destructive battle, but also don't want to hurt a bunch of random people. I guess the only big issue with this place is that it can be defeated by a teenager who knows math super well. As seemingly random as the Mirror Dimension looks, it's clearly defined defined by a set of mathematical rules that can be exploited if the right person is in that dimension. So yes, although Strange seems super powerful within the mirror dimension as his understanding of it is greater than the average person, it's still not unbeatable. It would be cool if Strange is able to access other types of dimensions with this certain spell other than just the mirror one. I mean, if he can access that one, could he access places like the other dimension Ta Lo from Shang-Chi using the same type of spell? That'd be interesting to see. Hey, even the simple spells can be quite unbreakable. That's the beauty of magic. In Infinity War, when Ebony Maw, aka Squidward, came to Earth to collect all the stones, he didn't have to wait that long because the stone was brought directly to him. The Eye of Agamotto housed the Time Stone, but even when Maw was winning the fight, he found he couldn't take the stone away from Doctor Strange. This was because of the theft protection spell that Strange cast, and it came with the now much memed line of a simple spell but quite unbreakable. It burned Maw's hand as he tried to grab it, and it forced Ma to improvise. See, sometimes simpler is just better. Strange probably should have put a theft protection spell on that big multiverse box thing in Spider-Man No Way Home, so Peter couldn't steal it. That would have solved all of his problems. A classic go-to spell that we see Doctor Strange utilize both in the MCU and in the comics is the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak spell. Man, who are these people? I guess it would be good to give a quick rundown. Cyttorak is described as both a god and demon that was once worshipped on Earth. See, that's what makes all these spells so interesting. They're not just simple spells, but rather they're calling on the power of very dangerous ancient entities. So the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak is a powerful binding spell that traps people in red tendril-like things and keeps them trapped. Yeah, Strange used them in the Thanos fights, but in the comics we've seen them used against tremendously strong rampaging villains like Juggernaut among many others. The comics won't tell you this, but Strange also probably uses this spell to wrap Christmas presents. Next up are the Bolts of Balthakk. It's an offensive spell that Strange used in his fight against Thanos. It's basically a blast of energy that causes damage. Anyways, want to hear who Balthakk is? He's a being of pure energy and is described as one of the principalities, which are ancient and powerful constructs. But hey, at least he's cool with his name being invoked so a wizard can blast a mad titan, right? They look a little different in the comics compared to the MCU, and I think the film franchise updated them to make the bolt more appealing visually. So I've discussed a few offensive spells Strange has used in the comics and in the MCU, but everyone knows that defense is equally as important. And Doctor Strange is one of those heroes with a lot of different protection spells on him. One of the most impressive that he casts is probably the Shield of Seraphim, which is exactly what it sounds like. Like, we know Strange loves circles, right? Well, the Shield of Seraphim is a massive shield that can be used to protect against devastating attacks. Like, sure, Strange has his little hand shields, but the Shield of Seraphim is much larger and way more effective. Like, in Infinity War, Strange used this spell to protect himself, Tony, and Peter as they crash land into Titan after not being able to land Thanos' ship. Then we saw not only Strange use it, but other sorcerers who showed up in that final endgame battle used it to help protect against the huge missiles Thanos' ship was launching. In the comics, Seraphim are the fifth choir of angels, so it makes sense why this would be a shield spell. One of the coolest spells that Strange has at his disposal is the ability to send other people and himself into the astral plane. When Strange was hurt in the original movie and knocked unconscious, he was able to use his astral body to float around and look all spooky. And as an added benefit, he was able to break through to our normal universe and interact with Christine, which makes this a really powerful spell and ability. Like, if you were able to do this, wouldn't you just stay in bed all day and send your astral form to all your work meetings? It's the perfect plane. And it's also interesting that Strange can send other people to their astral forms, as evidenced by Peter Parker in Spider-Man No Way Home. Of course, this does have a few weaknesses. Like, if the spider-powered superhero you send to the astral plane has a spidey sense, he can still most likely move his regular body even while in astral mode, which is pretty neat. I wanted to end this list with a few spells that we haven't seen in the MCU, but I hope we do someday. The first is the Montesi Formula. This spell is a doozy. It comes from the Darkhold, so you know it's nothing to mess with, but the end results are fascinating. It destroys all vampires on Earth. How specific. Now, being that Blade is about to make his MCU debut with his own film, and the Darkhold is such an important MCU artifact now, I could see the franchise tying the two together by making this Montesi Formula super super important to the Blade plot. Not only would it be an all-powerful spell, but also it would tie in Blade with the more mystical element of the MCU, and that opens the door to characters like Ghost Rider or even a team-up group like the Midnight Suns down the line. Now, the only downside is that, of course, such a powerful spell like this in the comics didn't last forever. If there were no vampires, then there would be no use for Blade. So even though this was cast in the comics, all the vampires did eventually return, so that's a bummer. Alright, another simple spell that's pretty self-explanatory. The Flames of Faltine is obviously a fire spell that burns everything it touches. Doctor Strange should have used this spell to clear out all the snow in his Sanctum Sanctorum in No Way Home. But what's interesting about the Flames of Faltine is that the Faltine are the race of beings that Dormammu and his sister Umar spawned from. So you know that this isn't just your average heat spell. I just want Strange to use it because it opens the door to exploring more about the Dark Dimension and Dormammu's past, which I think would be interesting. Finally, I want to bring up the crystals of Cyndriarr, which is a particularly brutal spell that we haven't seen used in the MCU. So we don't know much about Cyndriarr other than it's a powerful mystic entity, but if Strange ever decides to bust out this spell, it's probably the one you should run away from the most. I mean, they're all bad, but this one is particularly dangerous. When Strange casts this spell, crystal shards appear everywhere. Shiny and cool, right? Well, no. If one of these crystals makes contact with you, then it causes your immediate demise. Talk about scary. Imagine how many fights in the MCU could have been avoided if Strange decided to use the crystals of Cyndriarr. Oh, sorry, Caecilius, instant death for you. Sorry, Thanos, you touched the crystal and now your heart stopped. But being so overpowered and overall just dangerous, I can see why this spell is one Strange would only use on rare occasions. Yeah, but with all this power, Strange still can't find a spell that permanently dyes his goatee the color he wants? That seems a tad bit easier than the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, right? If you could cast one spell to change something about yourself or the world, what would you choose? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.